teachers are being put under an impossible situation with working with large groups in the way that they're required, because how can they understand each individual?
The education that we give to students, whilst it's a very good education, does not enable them to take charge of their own learning. It's all very much teacher-led, and therefore you get motivational problems with students because it's something that is done to them rather than something done by them.
I can remember one guy as an IT manager who'd got straight A's at school, gone to Oxford, got a first, an MBA, got a distinction, and was finding life a problem. I remember breaking down in tears at one point in a group saying, you know, I've done all these things that I'm supposed to do by the world, and I'm unhappy, I'm a failure at work, I'm not a good manager. You know, why is this so? You know, why weren't people helping him to think about what is needed to be able to lead a good life? And it isn't just about qualification.
You have to break it down into small, human-scale units in which people are known, honoured and cared for, and it's within those conditions that we can begin to make real choices about our learning and our lives. Well, here we are in this lovely new building, an arts block, and that's pertinent to what we're discussing today and the work that's going on in the school, because the arts are essentially about making meaning. They're actually different ways in which human beings try to make sense of their lives together in very creative ways. And the initiative that's going on in this school and in a sister school not far away is precisely about how young people not only make choices about their learning, but actually make meaning out of their lives.
Yeah, you should get talked at rather than
people actually listen to you.
It's just being able to say what you want and being actually asked about what you want to learn rather than being told what they think you should learn.
Within our curriculum, you don't really get a chance where you just get to sit down and talk about yourself and to hear what others are doing.
It was good because we got like a chance for everyone to give their input to you to help you.
From one person looking at a problem or a situation, they might not be able to see the easiest solution, and with just someone else's input into it, you can have a different frame of mind.
It helped me think about my future a lot more. You definitely start to think outside of school.
Person-centred education is what we're about here. We focus on what it is to be a person, because I think one of the things that's happened in the last 15 years or so is that we've forgotten about education and we've become obsessed with schooling. So this is a way in which young people are working together with adults in quite a different way to the ones that we're used to in the normal system.
The Self-Managed Learning Project is working with small groups of students. We get these students to have a look at their learning experiences in the past. If we start with you, Lauren, what do you think is important?
Commitment.
And how they feel about themselves and their learning at the moment in order for them to pursue their learning in the future.
You have a facilitator within your group. There was like one sort of per 6 of us, and he got to know us over the few months.
We used to meet, I think, once every 3 weeks, and we'd spend an hour in form time, and then part of our next lesson, and it would be us getting together and discussing in groups our main aims for the future and that kind of thing.
The starting point is very much how do we start with the person and help them to learn what they want to learn. We ask that students do 2 things. One is write a learning agreement which sets down their goals and the ways in which they want to achieve it, and that they join a group and learn to work with colleagues and support them in their own learning. The students' learning agreement is an important document. We ask the students to think about 5 questions. Where have I been? What's been my past experience? Where am I now? What kind of person am I? What abilities I have? Therefore, what kind of goals can I set that build on those? How will I achieve those goals? And how will I know if I've got to where I wanted to get to? How will I measure it? And we're quite tough on that notion they should measure. So we're not against assessment, but we think the best assessment is self-assessment.
So would it be helpful to work through a few questions now?
They set their targets, whereas in the classroom, the teachers are setting targets.
They're setting goals and they're looking at ways of achieving those goals, sometimes by breaking them down into small, manageable steps. So how are you doing that?
Just like doing it in front of my mum all the time, and that's what I'm doing.
They might wish to have better friendships with other people. That might be something they need to be working on. Their other goals may be sporty.
What qualifications do you have to be a coach?
Or just to be able to do something which they are able to see the goal.
Right, so the first thing to do was for you, Will, to talk about your experience.
I've talked about a few things. I think rugby, because I've been doing quite a lot of rugby, and I said that was one of my goals, to be better at rugby. But I think to do with films is probably the biggest one that I've put forward. I did enjoy the day, and I learnt quite a lot about all of the technical stuff, like special lenses.
We do insist on there being ground rules about listening to each other, about, whatever they decide on.
There's a secrecy rule that we weren't allowed to say each other's goals and things outside of the group. It's good because it doesn't stop you from saying kind of personal things that you feel it's all tight and close.
The fact that it is about small groups rather than it being in a classroom situation means that it allows people to talk about issues that wouldn't naturally come up and emerge in a classroom situation, because part of the structure and part of the organisation of a group is the confidentiality issue.
In the meetings themselves, there was a very clear structure about giving each person time to talk, and that everybody else should listen. Now, initially they find that difficult because they're not used to listening to each other. So there is a very clear structure to the process. It's not a free-for-all.
You have to abide by the rules, or otherwise it just doesn't work. It's informal.
What, on a Thursday afternoon?
But you have to be quite formal in the way that you act.
Yeah.
I think there's a number of principles that underpin this approach. The first principle is the principle of freedom. The young person herself identifies, in conjunction with others, the learning that matters to her. So she initiates it.
Right, if you think, Lauren, what's going to be the most useful thing to you?
Lauren would like to be a professional netball player.
Is it going to be useful to work on the questions for Mrs. Shipley?
So she needs to be seeking ways to get to that. Other people in the group are supporting her with that, with giving ideas on how she could find information out.
Can you think of any questions that Lauren could ask about that would be useful for asking Mrs. Shipley?
Like, how do you get into coaching?
How do you get into it? What about that, Lauren? Would that be useful?
Yeah.
Then we come to the notion of equality. So those young people in that group don't label each other as better or worse, more able or less able, I'm in this set or that set. They relate to each other as individuals who are part of that group, who have particular needs and interests, and they honour the humanity of the other people. They don't put labels on their foreheads and say, oh, you're a such and such. And our education system, our schooling system rather at the moment, is absolutely rife with this. And we're never going to get anywhere until we address those fundamental issues.
What would be important, do you think, as a team player? Because it's not like tennis or a solitary sport, one that you're playing on your own. You're actually playing as a team.
There's a third thing to mention, which is the importance of care. In other words, caring for each other. And by myself as a member of a group caring about contributing towards the learning of another person in the group, that makes a massive difference.
Would it be helpful to have James reading back those questions to you, Lauren, so you can think about what's been covered so far?
What university did you go to and why? What courses did you take? How do you get into coaching? What was your career path?
Thank you, James. That's great. I think we need to move on to John's time. John wants to be a writer. That is his sort of long-term goal. And one way he decided of making progress with this goal was to meet a real author. Now we've got to decide what questions we're going to ask Jane Hissey this afternoon.
How do you plan out? That'd be quite an important one.
Maybe that could be the last question. She can sort of show you the sort of things that she does.
Yeah, it's quite tricky to know what the best way is. We have to be very careful thinking about what needs to be asked at the beginning and what needs to be asked at the end. What are your thoughts about that?
What we could do is we could let her do her main talk first, and then any questions that she hasn't said or if anything she hasn't explained after, we could always ask her.
Mm-hmm. John decided that he felt quite uncomfortable doing all the questioning for himself, and the group were very happy to take turns and to support him with that by asking questions as well. So how are you going to organise the questioning?
Everyone, person asks a question at a time, we go around the table.
What courses did you take? I did in my degree, I did geography and sports science as a combined degree.
How did you get into coaching?
Okay, well originally it's obviously through teaching, and then with my love for netball and my enthusiasm for netball.
I think it allows students to see that learning takes place not just in the classroom, it takes place in a whole range of environments.
Hello, James, Sean, Caroline, and Lauren.
Right, and I'm John.
I think it did throw them to begin with because, you know, it's like asking someone what they want for Christmas. The list can be very long and you know, very exciting, but they needed support in actually narrowing things down to a manageable focus so that they could engage in a project that meant something.
I think we started off, it's quite awkward because it's quite hard to talk about yourself for a long time.
I had serious doubts at the beginning.
Yeah, me too. I was just sort of like, is this just a big waste of time?
Yeah.
£115 left. I think once you got into it more and you looked back on it, you realised how much it
I
did help.
definitely benefited from it.
Yeah, a lot.
Before I started the learning group, I was kind of burying my head in the sand and just assumed that, well, I didn't really plan ahead and I didn't think about what universities I was going to go to. Joining the learning group sort of helped me to plan my future, really.
Through doing this, I think it made me take a step back and look at what was important to me and how
I manage your time
how I
and
could
stuff.
better organise my time and do everything to the best of my abilities, because I am a very disorganised person, full stop.
Generally, if there's something that I don't really want to learn about, I don't pay attention and I'll just muck around. I work a lot better with the things that I want to do.
One of the things that stood out for me actually with the group that we're currently working with in Year 8 is they're a group of students that possibly are the ones that maybe get sent out of lessons more, that have some behavioural problems. And one of the boys spoke to me a couple of weeks ago and said, when are these groups ending? And I thought he meant, I want them to end quite soon. And he said, because I want it to carry on, and can they carry on next year? Because I've learnt more in the 5 meetings that we've had than I have in my entire school life.
Because then you can put into the stories what you want to put into the illustrations.
If you're reaching students on that level, it has to be positive and it has to then affect what they then do in the classroom.
At the start of a programme, well, we typically would have a briefing session, and we would also bring in parents so that they understand this, and parents are always invited in at the start.
Did you manage to get to talk to them?
Yeah, I did.
When we evaluated at the end and parents came back in, as I say, they were one round in terms of saying how effective it was.
She started coaching outside of school for Hailsham.
The curriculum is already overcrowded, so we would need first to sort of demonstrate the advantages of the approach to the teachers. I think if they began to see the increase in motivation amongst the students, then, you know, obviously it's going to make the time go further if the students are more involved, more interested in working harder. It's a holistic approach, so it's looking at the whole person, not just about what you want them to achieve by 14 or by 16 or by 18 or 19. And so one of the things that schools would need to do is to look at how to sustain it. And we've been fortunate because we've worked with the University of Sussex and we've had additional funding to provide learning advisors to come in and train our staff and work with students. But I think the key for any school is making it sustainable.
If you look at the new legislation in terms of workforce reform and the kind of ways that teachers and adults other than teachers, learning support assistants, are being asked to work now, this actually fits very nicely into trying to imagine a different way of working with young people.
Would it be helpful for Christine to give you a hand with that, John?
What we've done this year is we've looked at ways of using our non-teaching support staff.
Christine's my co-advisor, and this is a way of training that we use in order for people to gain the confidence to run learning groups for themselves.
I've done 5 years as a teaching assistant, which actually sets me up very well for the job that I do now.
A person-centred approach starts from a view about how we become people. And basically it's saying that we don't do that on our own. It's saying that we become persons through our relations with others. And if you start to translate that into practical realities of a school, it means that you understand that young people learn best and flourish as human beings when they're in close partnership with other young people and with adults.
People learn when they interact with other people. Learning happens through relationships. It's not about a teacher necessarily standing up in front of young people and telling them what to do. It's giving young people the opportunity to talk with each other.
Often young people go through an educational system never having thought about what it is to be a good learner.
If we can do it with the younger students, then what we're doing is equipping them with skills and interests that's going to take them right through the next 7 years or so of their education.
Our aim is basically, how can we help these students to lead a good life in the future? When people say what you're about, I'm saying that's it, it's simple, you know. They need to lead a good life. Good has to be defined by that person, not by us.
It's interesting to hear what other people want to do with their lives, and it's useful to get their input on your plans.
I think it's the best thing in school, really.
I have learned like better to sort of look back and think it's not worth getting really, really stressed about things. It's better to devote your time to things you really need to.
And things you really want to.
And also have time to enjoy yourself.
Things you ought to feel
So
you
at the
ought
end
to
of
be
the day,
doing.
we are 16.
Yes.